For the first example, I want to take another look at the paper from last week on sedentary behaviour and quality of life measures across students who meet physical activity guidelines, either aerobic or muscle conditioning, or both, or neither. Oh, sorry, my head popped down. And there's a link there to the whole paper if you want to refresh your memory. So last week we had a look at some of the first tables in their results where they did some analysis of variance, and in this part we're going to have a look at some of their regression results. So for this table here, they have come up with two regression models to look at the relationship between these quality of life measures and the screen time sitting. So if we look at this, so these are two separate regression models. This first one, the outcome they're trying to model is the physical quality of life. And it's a little bit confusing when you're getting started because they've got a few variables here. But the main variable that they're associating it with is this screen time sitting. So if we were doing just a simple linear regression model, we would have the outcome as the quality of life is equal to a constant plus some multiple of this screen time sitting. And then they've made some extra adjustments for these other things, which I'll talk about in a second. So in understanding the basic model, we can see that the parameter estimate here in the B column is negative. So this means as the screen time sitting goes up, there's actually a decrease in the quality of life, the physical measure. So this is telling us for every 1 unit increase in screen time sitting, so that would be for every extra hour of screen time sitting, you would expect a decrease on average of -3 points on the physical quality of life measure. Overall, this model is explaining about 30% of the variation in the data, and then we've got some p-values here for which variables are significant. So if we just have a look just above screen time, these are little adjustments that they're making for the students who meet one of their physical activity guidelines or both. And the reason that the students who don't meet any of the physical activity guidelines aren't listed here is because they're the reference level, so they're sort of included in the constant value. And then the interesting thing about this paper, and then why I like it, is because they've also included some interaction effects. So is there an interaction or a moderation of the effect of your screen time sitting based on whether or not you meet your physical activity guidelines? So this is probably best explained by looking at the graph that they include, which is on the next slide. So on this slide, we can see the relationship between screen time sitting and physical quality of life. Now they have sort of done the x-axis in an interesting way from where they've sort of standardized the scores and put the mean in the middle and one standard deviation either side. I wouldn't be distracted by this. You can just look at it as screen time goes up, the physical quality of life seems to be going down. But this is moderated by whether or not they're meeting their physical activity guidelines. So for students in this green group who are meeting both their physical activity guidelines, this regression line actually seems to be flat. I can't quite get my pointer up there. So it doesn't actually seem to be having any impact on those students. But the effect is different for these other two groups. So if you're only meeting one of your guidelines or none of your guidelines, it's saying that on average, as your screen time increases, your quality of life is going down. So the fact that sitting in front of a screen is having a different effect depending on whether or not you're meeting your physical activity guidelines, one, it's very interesting, and two, we would call that an interaction effect, or it's a moderation effect is how they describe it in the article. So as a side question, we might ask, does increased screen time cause lower quality of life? And hopefully you'll answer, well, it might, but you can't demonstrate it with this particular research because it's not an experiment, it's just an observational study. They didn't force people to watch TV and then see if their quality of life went down, and they also didn't take away their TV to see if the quality of life went up. So we would want to be quite careful about how we interpret these results. And I would encourage you to go through and read the discussion from the authors, and they go into a bit more detail about what is having an effect and what's interacting with what.